Hey there, welcome back to some Remnant. We are doing a Guts themed build today. We did one a while back in the past, right? And there's a bunch of new toys with the DLCs that have come out here. Specifically, this last one, Dark Horizons, we've gotten ourselves the Black Greatsword, which is, it's literally just Guts' Greatsword. And we're using it. You know, what else is there to say? If you're trying to do a Guts build, I'd say all you really have to do, simply using the sword is going to do a lot of the work for you. That's pretty good. But there's a lot more you can kind of do to really make a Guts themed build. There's a lot more in-depth things to it, right? Now, I am playing on Nightmare because it's just more fun on Nightmare. I've gone a lot more for flavor in this build. It is not nearly as efficient as it probably could or should be. So that's why I did Nightmare. I had been doing a bunch of Apocalypse stuff, but I mean, I'll be honest, it was mostly just kind of annoying. So you can do it, right? But you're gonna have more fun on something like Nightmare, where you can actually go in and like wade through the enemies and really feel like you are actually able to just rip and tear, essentially. But as we go into it, like, what does Guts do? What is his whole thing, right? Well, he's from the manga Berserk, right? Hence the whole going berserk and stuff like that. And the big thing he's known for is the giant sword, which is what we have going on here. It's very cool. It has a very unique moveset. I mean, I say very unique. It is a unique moveset. The rest of the great swords do not have that moveset. And it also has a bunch of unique abilities built into it. It has the Indomitable stuff, which basically is Steadfast, which when you have your charged attacks going on, that is going to allow you to take reduced damage, and then any damage you do take gets turned right into gray health. You can see we have a bunch of gray health right now. Oh, missed him there. And then the other part of it too, kind of a downside, is that it weighs more. It actively adds 15 to your encumbrance. So if you're kind of at a heavy load-ish already, and you, especially if you don't have any points in strong back, you're going to be at a really heavy load. So keep that in mind. But it is very cool. It does fulfill that idea of playing as Guts. The other things that Guts is known for, right? Depending on where you kind of like find him and the whole like storyline and arc and everything, is going to change what he has available to him. I'm kind of going for a post-Eclipse Guts. Sort of like when he's got Berserk armor and everything, which also, by the way, if you are in the process of reading the manga and you don't want to have spoilers, then this probably isn't the video for you. I'm going to try not to say anything too outlandish, but you never know what's going to happen, right? But anyways, I'm going for more kind of the actual like Berserk armor look, hence why I'm using the Fey Royal body plate. It's not perfect, I would say, for the armor, but I do like how it kind of looks. It has a dark metal look to it. It has a cloak, like he has a cloak whenever he's wearing the armor. So it kind of fulfills that same idea, that like kind of style. And from there, you know, other than the sword, what else does he use? Well, he's got a bunch of other gadgets and tools, because Guts, while being like a huge formidable warrior and swordsman, he's known as the Black Swordsman. He is also like, he's got all kinds of tools in his arsenal to defeat and kill demons and whoever else just kind of stands in his way. He has a fully automatic crossbow, which we are sort of representing with the Trinity crossbow. Obviously not fully automatic, and I don't particularly like the Trinity crossbow, but it does get us a little bit closer to what we're trying to build here, right? He will also use bombs. He also has a cannon in his prosthetic metal arm. So we've got the Meridian. I can't hit this lady for the life of me. But I've got the Meridian because that's kind of like the bombs. And then the mod actually shoots rockets, which is a lot like the, you know, cannon in his arm. You could probably pull out the Corrupted Meridian as well and have that do like the same thing. But I think this one kind of fits better in a way. And I kind of like the standard Meridian more than the Corrupted one. Now from there, as far as the like actual style of the build goes, I've leaned into a gray health build, which a lot of the things that I feel are like Guts adjacent all kind of like deal with having gray health. So it all kind of lines up pretty nicely. We actually have a reasonably functioning like setup here, right? And I think with some minor tweaking, you could kind of make it like much better and like an actual good build maybe. Chunk. Oh, let's see here. All right, when he gets ready to charge, I want to show you some of that damage reduction. That was some of the damage reduction with our charge attack. An elite. Okay. Let's see if we can block a hit from him. Oh, no. We need to get out of that because he will grab us there. I want to do... Yeah, let me see some trades. Charge attack to block. Charge attack again to block some more hits. And you can see we're getting a ton of gray health back thanks to our setup. So we can sit there and actively trade with the enemies. And then when we hit them, we get a ton of health back from it. And we're actually hitting harder because we end up with more gray health, which is going to be increasing our crit damage and everything with our mutators. And then when we sit and charge the attacks on the melee weapon, it actually enhances how much raw damage they're doing. So just sitting there charging the attacks and trading does turn into a lot of damage for us. But anyways, right, we're using Trinity Crossbow. We've got Scrap Shot in there because he uses grenades, he uses bombs, he uses a crossbow, he uses all kinds of things to help him to deal with these enemies. You know, he has no problems using whatever he has to in order to deal with them, right? And he will also gamble his own life away in order to deal with them, hence why there's a lot of trading involved here. One thing so I really like the moveset on this weapon. I really like the weapon in general, but man sometimes the like forward momentum is too much and I step past enemies and I miss them and it's just really obnoxious. But since we're going for gray health, there's a couple of things that we have equipped to just like keep us in that spot, right, with just constant gray health. Specifically, we've got the Bitter Memento, which to me fits really well with everything Guts has had to go through because, you know, he has like there's a lot for him to be bitter about, right? And so we use that and it restricts our health with 1% of gray health. So all the effects that require gray health are automatically triggered. Look how we just lob a bunch of grenades in there. That's totally something Guts will do as well. Like, he has no problems just sitting there, and he will absolutely just lob a bunch of arrows, lob a bunch of grenades, bombs, rockets in order to get rid of guys. Though he will save things as a kind of like trump card, you know, like surprise them with, oh, by the way, there's a cannon in my arm, and you guys didn't know about it. We are using the Challenger, and so to help us with I'm activating my Berserk Armor like effect because it's a very powerful kind of like cursed magical item that makes him go berserk and fixes his body and allows him to basically push it beyond what he should actually be able to do as far as the limits of his human form. It does kind of snap his body into place, and Juggernaut will allow us to do a bunch of like a lot better melee stuff. And with the Bitter Memento, Bitter Memento actually makes our skills cost gray health, and so I think that fits amazingly with what the Berserk Armor ends up doing to Guts' body, where it literally snaps it into place and is costing him health. Like, yeah, it's allowing him to do things, but it's also quite literally moving his arms around and reforcing them into shape, piercing through bones in order to hold them together. Like, it's some gnarly stuff. Like, it's pretty brutal. Yeah. Another thing I would like to say about like what Guts does is he's very fast, right? A lot of enemies, when they look at him, they see his giant sword, and their first thought is, there's no way this guy's going to use it. He cannot carry that. There's no way. He's going to be slow as can be. And then he's incredibly fast. Like, he's much faster than they actually anticipate, and it always throws them off. And then that's many times all he needs in order to win, or at least put himself in a position where he could win. Chop and chop. There we go. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, you got me. Boom, boom. There we go. But to help him out with the to help him with some of the speed for the melee thing, we do have on the Berserker's Crest, which, I mean, is literally in the name, Berserker's Crest. And if you go into the flavor text, it also mentions how, like, you know, these certain Gull Warriors could, like, persevere through, like, you know, tough odds by using, like, speed, power, and guts. So, I mean, it's totally a reference, right? You know? But it makes our melee attack speed 10% faster. It also reduces the stamina cost of those charged melee attacks so that we can actually sit there and charge and trade into things from the enemies without using all of our stamina. The other thing that I'm using here, owie. Oh, and there's a Die Hard perk. I always forget how much damage they do with those stupid projectiles. And I knew it was coming too, and I had a brief thought of, I'll use the healing shield and that'll protect me. I didn't do it. And you might be wondering, like, how is Guts using a healing shield? He doesn't really use magic. And I agree. But the overall medic, I think, fits pretty well. Was one was a challenger, and then two was his party, right? So he has Puck, who is a fairy that ends up helping him, and he ends up healing Guts a lot. And I find that the healing shield in my mind can be represented through that. You know, the healing shield can represent that healing from Puck, or even Shirka, or one, you know, anybody in his group and party helping him out later on in this series. But since we are doing so much with Greyhealth, our melee weapon has a mutator. It's called Guts in there. Surprise, right? And as long as we have Greyhealth, it actually has an increased melee crit chance by 25%, which is a pretty sizable amount. And then at level 10, it also has an effect where based on the percentage of Greyhealth that you have, it's going to get increased crit damage. So, like, when we sit there and we trade with the enemies, and we take a bunch of damage, it all gets turned into Greyhealth, which means we now have suddenly a larger percentage of Greyhealth, which means we have a better crit chance, and then more crit damage, and we're sitting there and charging our melee attack, which means those melee attacks are just baseline doing more damage. So we can get some really meaty criticals when guys decide they want to, like, actually go and try and trade with us. And with the extra melee attack speed, you know, it basically allows things to come out just a little bit faster. We do have two more rings that I have on in the setup. One stays on anytime as I switch around my gut setup, and that's the Rally Band. That's a newer one that came with, I think, the Yesha DLC, the Lost Kingdom. But it basically makes your melee strikes convert up to 10% of your gray health into health, or like percentage of your gray health into healing, and it goes up 10%. So if you have a whole bunch of gray health, you get a melee hit, it's going to convert a bunch of it into just straight health. So anytime you see us like trading and we get big chunks of health back, is because of that ring. And so mechanically, it fits really well with what we're doing. And then even like kind of like thematic and like flavor wise, in the band, it talks about how, like, you know, there was basically a band of soldiers. They kind of like lost everything and all they had left was each other. And I really felt like that resonates with like Guts and what he has kind of dealing with, right? Tried to neutral dodge that and I messed it up. Right, because he loses the Band of the Hawk, and then he ends up finding a whole new group with everybody that he meets along the way. And that's how he, like, you know, basically is going to make it through everything, is through relying on these others and the positive that's coming from knowing them and aiding each other, right? And so I really liked the flavor of that to go with Guts. I just felt really fitting. Yeah. And then the last ring is the Grand Memento. This is a newer one that I hadn't really messed with. The main reason I went with it is because we are currently at a medium load. Now, normally with Strongback and you know, like any kind of the like heavy armors, whether it's the Bruisers or, you know, this Fey Royal Body Plate, whatever, you're going to be at a medium roll with the full stacks of Strongback. However, because we have this sword on, we actually are not. We're at a heavy load. The Grand Memento, that gives us stamina. That gives us a reduced encumbrance load by like 5% as well. I'm in trouble. Why can't I roll? I couldn't roll. Gives us more stamina, gives us reduced encumbrance, so it basically puts us at a medium level, as well as gives us more stamina, which is totally something that, like, Guts can, like, do. He has, like, all kinds of stamina. I didn't open any of these shortcuts. But the other thing is that the flavor text talks about how the Dran, you know, they kind of, like, survive anything, right? They've been through much. Maybe some people have been through worse, but, you know, they've been through a lot, and they're still persevering, which is absolutely Guts to a T, right? Like, he's been through so much, and he's still going on. He's still fighting. He's still persevering, you know? And so I felt it was pretty okay there. I would also like to make an honorary mention to our concoction. The concoction is the Dark Cider. It has a fun little flavor text in it. Let's see here. Label barely recognizable. It's a whole Darksiders reference, which is another one of their games. But it does say this is no drink for a horse. Well, the Berserk things also come from the Dark Horse comics. And Dark Horse comics? Dark Horse something. I'm having a brain fart. But at any rate, right? It comes from that. And so I love the idea of this Dark Cider. No drink for a horse. The Dark Horse, you know? Is that a bit of a stretch? Maybe. but it does give us more health, more stamina, increased movement speed, because again, Guts is fast. He is fast. All right, let's try and do better this time. I can do better. One of the big problems with this setup, you know, a couple things, right? One, like I said, this is very much for flavor. A lot of the things are mechanically fit with each other. They are, you know, they do kind of work with each other. However, they're not like that strong of a combo per se. And so you can find yourself struggling on Apocalypse because it's not that good, right? I do a lot of like not like optimal things all the time, but it can be okay to go through it. It can be a struggle though, and so that makes it not really fun, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's why I put it on Nightmare. It's a little more fun. It allows us to be a little more flavorful with what we're doing and function. I hate that third attack chain because I just go right past the enemies. You see how we're just going how we're just moving right past her. When enemies are right in your face, the moveset has such a hard time connecting with some of them. Charge attack. Boom. There you go. 2400. The other problem is, right, we are largely melee focused, right? That's where we've got a lot of our strength. That's where we're doing a lot of our damage. So depending on the enemy you fight, this build can be incredibly strong. Like when we've got all these like dudes on us, like we can just sit there, trade with them, and do a ton of melee damage because they are actively on top of us. But when you deal with like Mother Mind, where there's a boss literally sitting inside of a hole in the middle of an open space and you cannot melee them, the build struggles, obviously. And so in those circumstances, it's just not as good, right? And that's where I find it kind of frustrating, which is, again, why I kind of prefer it on, like, Nightmare at least. Because you can actually still function and take things down without spending years doing it. All right, Prism Enhancement. Hooray for us. Speaking of prisms, it's pretty much all melee focused. Melee crit chance, health bonus, melee speed, total melee speed, melee damage, damage reduction, stamina, melee critical chance, etc., etc. So I find that that's been working pretty okay for me. I'm going to go more damage reduction. All right, let's fight an Aberrant, and then I'll kind of give you guys a little bit more like actual look at like the things that I have equipped. And then I'll actually talk about a couple other items that I think you could use for a Guts theme that are, you know, okay, they can do some pretty fun and good things, but it's a lot more dangerous. Definitely, I find it not as strong as like what we've got kind of going on here, simply because it's more dangerous. Drop you. Boom. Shocking is scary. I don't like that. It's like fighting the freaking Demon King again. Oh, except we're totally chunking him down. He's trapped in a corner. What is a cursed wretch going to do? I say he. I'm pretty sure that was a she. Chop. All right, cool. It just absolutely smoked him. See, that's what I mean about, like, the build can be strong, because you can literally get something in a corner and then absolutely shred into him. How much damage are we going to take here? That did, like, no damage to us. That was really weird. Okay, let's give you the actual breakdown here, right? So here we go. Challenger and Medic as our archetypes. Challengers is just obvious pick, right? He's the struggler, the black swordsman. Everything about it just fits perfectly with the character that is Guts. Juggernaut, again, of course, that's going berserk. Medic, like I kind of explained, he's always on the mend. He's always getting horribly damaged and then having to pick himself back up. So we want to use that. Plus, some of the healing skills and stuff can be represented through Puck. Now, for the amulet, it's the effigy pendant. I found this is kind of my favorite, best pick for it because we're doing so much with gray health. And so while we have gray health, which is all the time, 15% increase to all our damage dealt, and then 10% damage reduction, more hits before our gray health goes away. This also feels like some kind of magic item, whether it's like one of those powerful fetishes or objects that the Witch of the Forest would have given them to protect, or maybe even like as a seal over the brand of sacrifice. Bit of memento, like I said, this is how we're getting all the gray health to stay active. I also think it fits pretty well as far as like what, you know, the brand of sacrifice kind of is. It also makes it so that the Juggernaut skill really acts and feels like that's what the Berserk armor is doing, where it literally hurts him to make his body keep functioning, things like that. The Dran Memento, as I mentioned before, gives us that stamina, reduce our encumbrance, so it puts us at that medium load. If we didn't have it on there, we would be at that 67. But it is nice because the flavor text does talk about how you know, we may not always look up at the drain can endure anything. They've already endured much more than most folks ever will. Not all, of course, but not by a long shot, but most. So, you know, it's just that idea of enduring, you know, just struggling on. And I think that fits pretty well. But there's a bunch of other rings you could swap in there as well. As long as they fit that idea of like either gray health, endurance, you know, fighting on and persevering. I think all those go pretty well. Berserker's Crest, you know, it's in the name. Berserker's Crest, melee speed, stamina cost. The Rally Band converts our gray health into healing. For our ranged gun, we've got the Trinity Crossbow. It's got Scrap Shot in there and Twisting Wounds because I like the idea of it causing bleeding, and it synergizes nicely with the Scrap Shot, which is also just a fantastic mod. If the situation is not good for Scrap Shot, use some other things that feel like something Guts would use, like Hot Shot. I could totally see him using some kind of like incendiary arrows or bolts in order to just catch enemies on fire and burn them up, you know? I could totally see him maybe doing some kind of crazy chain thing. I could also see him using Witchfire and just sending out a big inflammatory immolation grenade and then just wading into it himself, because that's 100% something Guts would do. The Meridian is, of course, our handgun. I put Detonator in there as far as our Mutator goes. It basically just gives more explosions. Every shot we do now does a second explosion, and then it also increases the weapon's base explosive damage by 20%. So we get a lot out of there. It can do a surprising amount of damage to enemies as they come walking up to you, and I do really enjoy that. If you don't have Detonator, you could maybe go with like Failsafe so that your mod is doing more damage, has a chance not to be consumed, things like that. The traits that I've chosen here, we've, you know, got the Strong Back and Triage from our archetypes, maxed out Regrowth for regeneration, maxed out Fortify for more damage reduction, which we are currently sitting at 53.5. Not amazing for Apocalypse, but not amazing for Apocalypse. But when you do also mix in an extra 15% damage reduction from the Greatsword, as long as you are actively using it and trading with enemies, you're pretty okay. We've gone into Swiftness because Guts does move pretty quickly. Kinship is maxed out because I was blowing myself up with the Meridian quite a bit. And Guts is absolutely going to like set off a cannon in his face if the demon is in his face and you think it's going to help him win. He will gamble his own safety to get rid of the enemy. So I think having Kinship so that he basically survives even better when he's like basically blowing himself up is a pretty good choice. Vigor will, of course, be maxed out. Expertise is maxed out as well for those skill cooldowns. It just feels like something Guts would absolutely do, though I think you could totally make an argument for Gifted as well so that those skills last even longer. Shade Skin. So he's just, there's so much he like deals with and endures as far as like fire, lightning, like just all the things. He's just incredibly durable. Like, honestly, if I could spare it, I would also put 10 points into Bark Skin because the guy probably has skin made of bark. You know, it's not all one giant scar. And then, so Shade Skin makes a lot of sense. Bloodstream. We've got so much gray health going on. He's constantly on the mend, constantly healing up. There's like, I have some theories on like how he's able to pull off things that he does, but that's not what this is for. So Bloodstream is maxed out. Recovery has 8 points into it. Normally I would do 5 points, and then I would have Endurance at 5 as well. But since I have the Drain Memento automatically giving me 20 stamina, I don't need to put any more points in Endurance, so I took those extra points and I put them in Recovery, just so that my stamina recovery was just even faster. So in between attacks, I could actively get my stamina back more quickly. Relic, gonna be honest, like mechanically, Salvage Start is the way to go, because it does stuff with gray health. Other than that, I don't know what the best relic would be to use with him. I think Tormented Heart, the idea of it, I think is fitting, you know, as far as a Tormented Heart goes. But I don't really like mechanically how it fits with the character. And so none of these, I just don't feel great about any of these, honestly. Like, not really any of them at all, though. Maybe Quilted Heart, Comfort and Haste acting without Forethought. Like, that could be something, right? A couple other options. As far as amulets go, if you don't want to use Effigy Pendant, another idea is the Hangman's Noose. There it is. This is pretty good for a couple reasons. I say pretty good. It's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, restricts health to 50% and backfills the rest with gray health. Here is your guaranteed 50% gray health bonus that you can use on a build, and I'm going to try it with something else. So it does fit with that gray health idea. The idea, like, later on in the series, he is really injured. He's incredibly weak, and he has a hard time recovering. He's not doing well. And so having 50% of his health be gray health, I think is pretty fitting. Very scary for Apocalypse. I did it a bit. You could do it. It's very sketchy. So Yeah. But the other part of it too is how Guts was born. He's born from his mother. He's born under a tree with a bunch of people hanging from it, because that's where his mother was. Yeah. From there, some other rings you could look at. You could look at the Ring of the Damned. To me, that's kind of like a representation for the brand of sacrifice. It's something that's kind of like on you and sticks to them. And I think basically it's like something that it marks you for like the royal hunters to go and hunt, right? So yeah, I think it just fits it perfectly. And then it goes completely in with the Grey Health stuff. With the Hangman's Noose, you're going to have the max 50 stack, so 20% more damage and an extra 5% crit chance. So that's pretty good. The Painless Obsidian is another great choice. We got Grey Health, you'll get haste and a stack of Bulwark. It's also about like ignoring or not feeling pain, etc., etc. I think it fits pretty well with the idea, with everything that we're messing with. There are, of course, a bunch of other rings that you could kind of like throw on and use for the whole setup, but I'll be honest, like this is like my fourth time recording this video. Things keep happening to them. The last one I actually was just really unhappy with, but some of the other ones, like my audio was not connected, and so it was actually dead silent, etc. It just went on and on. So I'm kind of tired of making this recording, but I could absolutely spend 20 minutes just talking about items that you could use and how to best cosplay like Guts. But this is kind of how I'm doing it here. So at any rate, I would like to thank you guys for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want me to do a different one, or you really would just, maybe there's like, if like 5 of you can say like, I really want to hear you just go super nerdy on like all the items that you could use for Guts, I will absolutely do it. And it will be 20 minutes of me just talking about items. Yeah, and then maybe I'll share my idea about why Guts can pull off some of the crazy stuff that he can do. But yeah, appreciate you checking it out. And until the next one, take care.